While they are considering this, Yusuke focuses on healing the unconscious child. Kahabel and Camillo, the leader of the soldiers, argue over the kingdom's evil ways and dictatorship, but the heroes resolve the argument for now. They decide it would be better to travel to Red Odoro with the soldiers and then decide whether to fight to rescue the heretics or let them carry out their mission. While setting up camp one night, Yusuke requests to speak with one of the older heretics named Fail. He reveals they are from the continent of Awe and asks that the young child named V be spared. The heroes ask him to share his side of the story, and he explains that there are currently two groups in the kingdom: those who worship only the king and those who worship both the king and a god. They belong to the latter group, and over the years, the teachings of their god have been forgotten. People have resorted to violence and fighting over trivial matters like who is the best Spider-Man. The kingdom wants to eliminate all followers of Aros, even from other continents, using this as a pretext to attack smaller nations. After hearing his story, they sit down with Camillo to hear his perspective. Camillo explains that previously, after wars ended, the families of soldiers who didn't return or who returned severely injured would become homeless and die in the streets. But the current king changed that by announcing a reward of a slave for everyone, saving his family from homelessness. The king wants to unite the continent, and that's why they must rid the world of all members of the evil Aros religion. After hearing his side, Yusuke becomes enraged and says she has decided that dictatorship is fundamentally flawed and that the king is using religion as an excuse to conquer smaller nations and create more slaves. It's essentially like a massive gang bullying smaller groups and turning them into their subordinates. Being a victim herself, she can't help but speak out against it. After hearing Yusuke speak against the king, Camillo stands up with his weapon and declares that, although he didn't understand anything she said, he knows she is trying to insult his king. However, Yusuke manages to calm him down with some smooth talk, explaining that the king isn't right. They continue their journey for a few days until Camillo informs Yusuke that they need to cross the mountain ahead, which will take around 7 days. After that, it's a 5-day journey to Red Odoro. With 13 days and a few hours left on their clock, it seems too close for comfort. Camillo suggests they use another passage that cuts through the mountain and will save them a lot of time. They all agree to take this route and start pushing their carts up to the entrance of a tunnel. Inside, Camillo explains that it's an ancient route and the mechanism at the entrance still works. They activate it, creating a path with some water in front of them, but suddenly the gate behind them shuts down. Camillo reveals that it's a trap and she can't let people travel with them, even if they are heroes. After being deceived by an obviously evil person, they keep moving forward and cross a bridge. They encounter many traps, and Yusuke accidentally gets pushed into a deep pit. The rest of the group decides to finish the mission on their own due to a lack of time. Meanwhile, Yusuke equips his trusty kitchen knife and starts chipping away at the wall to make footholds for climbing up. Meanwhile, the rest of the group reaches the center of the area, where they encounter an ancient mechanism called a gargoyle, a man-made fighting machine. Yusuke keeps climbing and making new steps, but it takes him many attempts of falling, getting knocked out, reviving, and trying again until he finally escapes. By the time he's out, there is no light left, and he is practically blind. He sticks to a wall and starts using his map interface to navigate. Along the way, he finds a log point revealing that one of the knights accompanying them died like an NPC. He feels sad but continues forward, because that's what humans do. On the other side, Kahabel and the other heroes are attacked by a group of vampire bats, while the gargoyle slowly approaches them. They notice a key attached to its shoulder, and Kahabel moves to fight it one-on-one while the others deal with the bats. Shindo moves up a little and chats with Kahabel as they fight. Kahabel compliments Shindo, saying she has the most potential among the 4 heroes. Shindo responds that it's because she used to play tennis 2 years ago. Their conversation continues until Kahabel is struck through the stomach and falls into the water below. Shindo witnesses her fall and realizes they just lost their strongest NPC, causing her to start losing her mind. The gargoyle starts advancing on Shindo, and she retreats in fear. Fortunately, this mirrors how Yusuke managed to level up while fighting the giant troll, and with that experience, she levels up. Time stops, and the game master appears to spin the wheel. Shindo remembers what Yusuke told her about this moment and uses the time stop to move forward and position herself to strike the monster. Her new role is a sword warrior similar to Kasu, but her strike on the gargoyle's chest does 0 damage due to its thorn mail build. Shindo takes emotional damage and then gets her left arm broken by a swinging strike from the enemy. She flies to the edge of the platform but manages to get back up and notices her arm heals quickly. She equips her sword and recalls Kahabel's lessons on fighting heavily defended and larger opponents. With that in mind, she summons her shield and charges forward. She sacrifices her sword arm, gets her shield smashed into the ground, but manages to slide between the gargoyle's legs and ends up on top of it. She then grabs her arm like a savage and runs the sword through the gargoyle's head into its heart. Just then, Yusuke arrives and discovers that Kahabel was stabbed and fell into the water. He immediately dives in to rescue her, which makes the other girls a little angry because he wouldn't save them before. Later that night, Kahabel wakes up, and her stomach wound is healed. She discovers that Yusuke used healing magic nonstop, draining magical power from the gargoyle's blood until she was fully healed. When he finished, he fainted. Upon hearing this, she turns and finds Yusuke sleeping beside her and bends down to kiss him. But at that moment, the other heroes walk in, and Yusuke's chance of getting his first kiss is quickly taken away. As they sit and talk about him, Kahabel says he reminds her of herself because he constantly pushes himself to see how far he must go before he can die knowing his life meant something. She shares that she is the 70th strongest knight in her kingdom, while her father is the 2nd, and her 2 brothers are both above the 15th rank. After their conversation, Yusuke wonders how long it will take to catch up with the soldiers. Kahabel says they took the longer route around the mountain, so they should catch up soon. She notes that it was never specified which goblin to kill, which settlements to find, or which village chief's requests to fulfill. It was always just any goblin or any 2 settlements, and so on. By that logic, they must deliver the correct goods to Red Odoro. The heretics don't meet the criteria, so they're probably not it, but it's not enough proof to give up on them. Yusuke suggests they split up, and everyone starts feeling deja vu. They form 2 teams, one with Shindo, Hakak, and a soldier from Kahabel's family, and the other with Yusuke, and Kahabel herself. Team Shindo will go ahead to find merchants and travelers with goods bound for Red Odoro and escort them, while Team Yusuke will catch up with the soldiers of D and rescue the heretics. With everything decided, they split up and go their separate ways, planning ways to ambush the soldiers. Kahabel worries that the soldiers sent a routine communication letter back to their kingdom before trapping them in the cave and mention the presence of knights from her kingdom. If they all go missing, this could lead to a war between their nations, and she doesn't want to be the cause of the next season of Game of Thrones. With that in mind, Yusuke says they must make the soldiers believe her kingdom is not at fault and must send a letter back to their king. Yusuke wonders how they'll manage this, but Yusuke grins creepily and says he's got a plan. After that, they follow the soldiers for a few days and eventually catch up. One night, while the soldiers are having some NPC talk, Yusuke emerges from the shadows and reveals himself. He calls Yusuke out of the crowd and reveals that everyone else died, and the other 2 heroes fell into a trap, unable to escape. He announces that he has joined the Aro's religion and is there to negotiate for his fellow devotees, giving them 1 night to release the heretics, or he will use his immortality as a hero to spread the teachings of Ardos throughout the lands. Camillo responds that Yusuke could still do that even after they release the heretics, so there is no negotiation. Yusuke mutters that it sucks to be them and walks away. Later that night, Yusuke sneaks out to talk to the soldiers in secret and reveals that she hates Yusuke and his arrogant attitude.